Picture this: the glittering skyline of New York City. A canvas of twinkling lights stretching out beneath the penthouse floor of Lumiere. The most exclusive restaurant in town. The air hums with the clink of crystal glasses, the murmur of elite conversations, and the faint strains of a jazz quartet. At the edge of this opulent scene stands Emily Harper, 29 years old. Clutching a modest gift box. Her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and dread. Tonight is her father's 60th birthday. A milestone celebrated in the kind of grandeur that defines her family's obsession with status. But Emily is no ordinary guest at this lavish affair. Beneath her simple navy dress and unassuming silver necklace lies a secret that could upend everything her family thinks they know about her. Buckle up, because this is a story of betrayal, revelation, and the kind of triumph that redefines what success really means. Emily grew up in a world where appearances were everything. Her family, the Harpers, lived in a sprawling estate in Westchester, New York, a far cry from the working-class roots of her father, Robert Harper. Robert was a self-made titan, the son of a mechanic and a diner cook, who clawed his way to the top of the real estate world through relentless grit and 18-hour workdays. His wife, Catherine Harper, once a small-town girl, had transformed herself into a socialite, curating a flawless image and hobnobbing with Manhattan's elite. Then there were Emily's siblings, her older sister, Lauren, 35, a Yale-educated corporate lawyer at a top-tier firm, and her brother, Michael, 33, a dermatologist catering to A-listers and influencers. Lauren's designer handbags and Michael's flashy sports cars were badges of their success, waved proudly at every family gathering. To them, worth was measured in envy. How many heads turned when they walked into a room? Emily, though, was cut from a different cloth. While her siblings thrived in the spotlight, she was the quiet dreamer, lost in books and big ideas about making the world better. She loved sketching, writing, and asking questions that made her parents uncomfortable, like why people valued money over meaning. This set her apart early on. "Why can't you be more like Lauren?" her mother would sigh, pointing to her sister's perfect GPA or her internship at a Fortune 500 company. Emily tried to fit the mold. She earned a marketing degree from NYU, a respectable but not Ivy League school, which her parents saw as her first misstep. After college, she landed a corporate job, but it crushed her spirit. The endless meetings, the cutthroat office politics, it felt like a betrayal of everything she valued. So, at 24, she walked away. That decision branded her the family failure. "You're throwing away your future," Catherine had lamented. "What will we tell people at the club?" Robert, who once read bedtime stories to Emily and taught her to ride a bike, said nothing, his silence heavier than any words. To them, Emily was now the underachiever, scraping by as a part-time barista at a cozy Brooklyn cafe, a job they found mortifying. What they didn't know, what Emily had carefully hidden for 5 years, was that she was the founder of BrightPath, a tech startup revolutionizing education for underserved communities. BrightPath's adaptive learning software had just secured a $100 million valuation after a major funding round. Emily lived in a modest brownstone apartment, drove a reliable Honda, and wore clothes that screamed practical rather than prestige. Why the secrecy? She wanted to know if her family could love her for who she was. Not what she'd achieved, but deep down, it was also about self-preservation. She'd seen how wealth and status had warped her family, and she refused to let it define her. Tonight's dinner at Lumiere was her chance to reconnect with her father, especially after his recent health scare, a minor stroke that had rattled her. Despite their growing distance, Emily loved him fiercely and wasn't ready to lose him. She chose her outfit carefully, a sleek but understated navy dress, paired with her grandmother's pearl studs and a simple silver chain. It was elegant, but to her family's status-obsessed eyes, it might as well have been thrift store chic. As she stood in her apartment, her best friend, Sarah, called to check in. "Ready to face the wolves?" Sarah teased. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied, her voice tinged with nerves. "Part of me wants to walk in there dripping in Gucci, just to see their faces." Sarah laughed. "You don't need to. You're a rock star, Em. They're about to find out. Emily smiled, grateful for the reminder. She wrapped her father's gift, a rare first edition copy of The Great Gatsby, his favorite novel, and headed out. Lumiere was a cathedral of luxury, its rooftop dining room offering panoramic views of Manhattan. Emily had been here before, hosting Bright Path's charity galas, and the staff knew her well. As she stepped off the elevator, the hostess, Mia, greeted her warmly. "Ms. Harper, so good to see you. The private room is set for your father's party." Emily leaned in, lowering her voice. "Mia, please don't mention my work or anything about Bright Path. My family, they don't know." Mia's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Of course, Ms. Harper. Discretion is our specialty." Emily sipped a sparkling water at the bar, steeling herself. Her family arrived in a wave of opulence. Catherine in a shimmering gown, Robert in a bespoke suit, Lauren and her fiancé, James, looking like they'd walked off a Vogue cover, and Michael making a spectacle of handing his Porsche keys to the valet. Emily approached, hugging her father and offering the gift. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said softly. He returned a distracted smile, already scanning the room for his business associates. Catherine's eyes swept over Emily's dress, her lips pursing. "Really, Emily, couldn't you have tried harder for your father's big day?" Lauren leaned in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Even the waitstaff here have better style." Michael grinned, clapping her shoulder, still rocking the barista budget. "Huh? Let me know if you need a loan for some real clothes." The words stung, but Emily forced a smile. Used to their barbs, her father was now deep in conversation with his colleagues, barely acknowledging her. As the group moved toward the private dining room, Lauren pulled her aside, her grip tight. You're kind of out of place here. This is Lumiere, not a coffee shop. Maybe tone it down?" Michael chimed in, holding a martini. "Yeah, sis. The menu here doesn't even list prices. Sure you can swing it?" Catherine joined them, her voice low but sharp. "Perhaps you should wait at the bar. Dear, we don't want to distract from your father's moment with his important guests." She gestured at Emily's dress like it was an offense. The public shaming hit like a tidal wave. Emily felt the eyes of nearby diners, the whispers of her mother's country club friends. "Just someone who got lost," Catherine murmured to a curious onlooker, pretending not to know her own daughter. Emily's chest tightened, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. For a moment, she thought she might break, a promise she'd made to herself never to do in front of them. Childhood memories flooded back, being relegated to the kids' table long after Lauren and Michael joined the adults. Her honor roll certificates ignored while her siblings' achievements were toasted with champagne. She'd always been the other daughter, invisible unless she conformed to their narrow definition of success. A security guard approached, his tone firm. "Is there a problem here?" Lauren smirked, clearly expecting him to escort Emily out. But then his face lit up with recognition. "Ms. Harper, the CEO of Bright Path? Your usual table's ready if you'd prefer it." The air froze. Before anyone could react, the restaurant manager, Daniel, hurried over. "Ms. Harper, we didn't know you were with this party. Is everything okay?" The head chef, Luca, appeared next, beaming. "Emily, I've got that lobster ravioli you loved last time. Shall I prepare it for your group?" Finally, the owner, Vincent, joined the fray. "Ms. Harper, we'd have reserved the Skyline Suite if we'd known you were coming. Your last gala here raised $3 million for kids' education, remarkable." The bombshell landed. Not only was Emily a VIP, she owned the building that housed Lumiere, one of Manhattan's priciest properties. Lauren's jaw dropped, Michael's smirk vanished, and Catherine looked like she might faint. Robert turned from his conversation, his eyes wide with shock. Emily stood tall, her voice calm but firm. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to join my father's celebration. If I'm still welcome." Lauren recovered quickly, her tone sugary. "Of course, just a little sibling teasing. Right, Michael?" Michael nodded, his face a mask of forced cheer. "Totally. Family jokes." Catherine slipped her arm through Emily's, as if they'd been allies all along. "Darling, why didn't you tell us about your company?" Emily disengaged her arm gently. Because I wanted to know if you could value me without it. Vincent, sensing the tension, ushered them to the private dining room, Emily now leading the group. No longer the afterthought, as they sat at the best table in the house. With views of the Empire State Building glowing in the distance, Emily caught her father's eye. For the first time in years. He looked at her with curiosity. Not indifference. The night was just beginning. But the truth was out. And nothing would be the same. The private dining room at Lumiere glowed under the soft light of crystal chandeliers. The Manhattan skyline sparkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a promise of something bigger. Emily Harper, 29, sat at the head of the table. A spot she'd never occupied at a family event before. Just minutes ago, her family, her father Robert, mother Catherine, sister Lauren, and brother Michael, had tried to banish her to the bar. Humiliated by her barista status and simple navy dress. Now, their faces were a mix of shock and forced smiles. Reeling from the revelation that Emily wasn't just a regular at Lumiere, she was the CEO of Brightpath. A $100 million ed tech empire. And the owner of the very building they were dining in. The air crackled with tension. And Emily knew this was her moment to speak her truth. To lay bare the pain she'd carried for years. What came next would either break her family apart or forge something new. As the waitstaff glided around, serving plates of seared scallops and truffle-infused risotto, Emily felt the weight of every eye on her. Her family's sudden shift, from scorn to sycophantic praise, was almost comical. Lauren, the Yale lawyer, leaned forward, her voice syrupy. So, Emily, tell us about Brightpath. I've always known you were destined for greatness. Michael, the dermatologist, chimed in with a nervous laugh. Yeah, sis. You've been holding out on us. Quite the mastermind, huh? Catherine, ever the socialite, was already spinning a tale to the woman next to her about how she'd always encouraged Emily's entrepreneurial spirit. Robert, her father, remained silent, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity she hadn't seen in years. Emily set down her fork, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Let's cut the act, she said, her words slicing through the room's hum. An hour ago, you were embarrassed to be seen with me. You told me to sit at the bar because my dress wasn't expensive enough. Because you thought I was a failure. Now you're proud? Why? Because I have money? Because I own this building? The table fell silent, the clink of cutlery replaced by an uncomfortable hush. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to pause. Lauren shifted in her seat, her perfect poise faltering. Emily, we were just worried about you. We wanted you to aim higher. Emily shook her head, her eyes locking onto her sister's. No, Lauren, you wanted me to be like you, chasing titles, designer labels, and approval from people who don't even know us. But did you ever ask if I was happy? Did any of you? She turned to her mother. Mom, when I was 10, I won a national essay contest. My piece was published in a magazine. And I was so proud. But that was the day Lauren got her Yale acceptance letter. And no one even came to my award ceremony. Catherine looked away, her manicured nails gripping her wine glass. Emily's gaze shifted to Michael. And you, Michael, when I made the dean's list every semester in college. You and Mom threw a party for Lauren's first big case win. My achievements? They were invisible because they didn't come with a corner office or a six-figure bonus. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it, his usual cocky grin nowhere to be found. Finally, she turned to her father. Dad, you used to tell me that character mattered more than money. You'd take me to Central Park. Just the two of us. And talk about integrity. About building something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me. You all did. Robert's face softened, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. Emily, he started. But she held up a hand. I hid Brightpath from you because I needed to know if you could love me for me. Not for what I've achieved. I wanted relationships built on something real. Not status or bank accounts. And tonight, you proved I was right to hide it. You were ready to kick me out of Dad's birthday because I didn't look successful enough. The business associates at the table exchanged awkward glances, sensing the raw honesty unfolding. Lauren's eyes flashed with defensiveness. So you lied to us for years, letting us think you were scraping by at a coffee shop while you were secretly a millionaire? That's manipulative, Emily. Emily met her sister's stare. I didn't lie. I just didn't share. There's a difference. And let's be honest, would I be sitting here right now if the security guard hadn't recognized me? Or would I be alone at the bar, excluded from my own father's celebration? The silence that followed was deafening. Her family's faces a mix of shame and realization. Robert cleared his throat, his voice rough. Emily, can we talk outside? Just you and me. She nodded, following him to the private terrace, where the city's lights stretched out like a sea of stars. The cool night air was a sharp contrast to the stifling tension inside. Robert leaned against the railing, looking older than his 60 years. I had a speech planned tonight, he said, his voice low, all about my journey, my legacy, but after what you just said, it feels empty. He turned to her, his eyes searching. When did I lose you, Emily? When did we go so wrong? Tears pricked at Emily's eyes, but she held them back. It wasn't one moment, Dad. It was gradual. You used to tell me stories about growing up with nothing. How you and Grandma shared a single pair of shoes some winters. You said character was what made a person. But as your business grew, as we moved to bigger houses and fancier circles, it became about status. I didn't feel loved unless I was achieving what you valued. Robert's shoulders sagged. I wanted you kids to have everything I didn't. Security, opportunity. Somewhere along the line, I let that turn into something else. Emily nodded. I get it, Dad. You wanted to protect us. But you created a different kind of insecurity, one where we had to earn your love with trophies and titles. Robert's eyes glistened. That stroke last month, you paid for the experimental treatment. Didn't you? The one insurance wouldn't cover. Emily gave a small nod. The procedure had cost $400, and she'd covered it anonymously. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Would you have accepted it if you knew it was from me, the daughter you thought was barely getting by? He had no answer, and that was answer enough. I want to know you again, Emily, he said finally, not as a CEO, but as my daughter. If you'll let me. Her heart softened. I'd like that, Dad. They returned to the table. The atmosphere subtly shifted. Robert was more present, asking Emily about her passions with genuine interest. Over dessert, Catherine pulled her aside to the restroom, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know you, Emily, she admitted. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you to succeed. But I was wrong. Emily softened but held firm. You never asked who I was. Mom, you wanted me to be someone else. But it's not too late to try. Catherine nodded, her usual polish replaced by raw vulnerability. Later, Lauren cornered Emily by the dessert table, her tone defensive. You've been judging us this whole time, haven't you? Emily shook her head. No, Lauren, I just wanted you to see me. Even when you thought I was a barista, you could have cared about my happiness. Instead, you saw me as an embarrassment. Lauren's facade cracked, her voice soft. I've been jealous of you, Em. Even when I thought you were broke. You seemed free. I'm trapped in a job I hate. Terrified of letting anyone down. Emily's eyes widened. Then change it. Lauren, it's not too late. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was the most honest moment they'd shared in years. Michael approached as the night wound down, his usual bravado gone. So, while I've been chasing Lamborghinis, you've been changing lives. Makes my work feel kind of shallow. Emily smiled. Your work matters, Michael. Helping people feel confident isn't nothing. But maybe you can do more of what lights you up. He nodded, thoughtful. I used to want to help people, not just their wallets. Maybe it's time to get back to that. The next week, Emily invited her family to BrightPath's headquarters in Brooklyn. They toured the vibrant office, where engineers and educators collaborated on software that empowered kids in underfunded schools. They heard stories of students in rural areas mastering math through BrightPath's tools, of teachers in low-income districts using the platform to spark curiosity. They learned about the company's foundation, funding scholarships and building schools in developing countries. For the first time, her family saw Emily's world, not through the lens of wealth, but through the impact she created. 6 months later, the Harpers were different, not perfect, but growing. Robert launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from tough backgrounds. Drawing on his own rise from nothing, Catherine started volunteering at a community center, slowly shedding her socialite armor. Lauren took on pro bono cases for educational equity, her competitive streak now serving a bigger purpose. Michael shifted his practice to include reconstructive work for burn victims and trauma survivors. Rediscovering why he'd chosen medicine, Emily, too, was changing. She realized her secrecy had been both a test and a shield, protecting her from rejection. Now, she was learning to share her true self, successes, struggles, and all, while setting boundaries with her family. Family dinners became less about status and more about connection. There were still missteps, moments when old habits resurfaced. But there was also laughter, vulnerability, and a willingness to see each other anew. Brightpath continued to grow, launching programs for refugee education and tools for students with learning disabilities. Emily and Robert even started a joint foundation, blending his business savvy with her tech innovation, a partnership that felt like a homecoming. The lesson burned bright. True worth isn't in money or titles, but in living with integrity, creating impact, and building authentic connections. People can change, even after years of misunderstanding, if they're willing to face the truth. That night at Lumiere, when Emily's family tried to cast her out, became a catalyst for something better. It proved that authenticity reveals who belongs in your life, and on what terms.